In 2019, someone paid $18 million for a Bugatti. They didn't even drive it before buying it. It sold straight off the reveal stage. No test drive, no negotiation. And that's still not even close to the most expensive Bugatti that exists. The most valuable one can't be bought. Nobody knows where it is. It's been missing for more than 80 years since World War II, and if someone found it tomorrow, it could be worth more than $100 million. This is the story of how a car can go missing completely, and still be decades later the most searched-for object in the entire automotive world. To understand why this car matters so much, you need to understand the man who built it. And he wasn't even the head of the company. Jean Bugatti was the son of Ettore Bugatti, the founder of one of the most respected car companies in Europe. But by the mid-1930s, Jean was doing much of the actual design work himself, and he wanted to build something that didn't just perform well, something that looked like nothing else on the road. The result was the Type 57 SC Atlantic. Low, black, with flowing fenders and a hood that seemed to stretch forever. Only 4 were ever built, between 1936 and 1938, and each one was slightly different. Here's the detail that made it instantly recognizable. A raised seam running down the center of the car, from the hood over the roof to the tail. It looks purely decorative. It wasn't. The original plan was to build the body from a magnesium alloy, incredibly light but impossible to weld safely. So instead of welding the panels together, engineers riveted them, and that seam became the visible result. By the time the final cars were built, they'd switched to aluminum, which could be welded, but the seam stayed anyway. It had become the car's signature. Underneath, a supercharged straight-8 engine pushed the Atlantic past 120 miles per hour. Extraordinary for a road car in the 1930s. This wasn't just beautiful. It was one of the fastest things you could legally drive. One of the 4 Atlantics built was different from the others in one specific way. It was Jean Bugatti's own personal car. He drove it himself, reportedly letting only a small circle of friends behind the wheel. Because of its color, it became known simply as La Voiture Noire, the black car. In 1939, Jean Bugatti was testing a different Bugatti race car on a public road near the factory, preparing it for an upcoming race, when a cyclist unexpectedly appeared in his path. Swerving to avoid a collision, he crashed. He was 30 years old. His father, Ettore, lost his son and, in many ways, the creative force behind the company's most ambitious designs, all at once. And barely a year later, an even bigger threat arrived, one that put every car the company had ever built at risk. In 1940, Germany invaded France. Ettore Bugatti understood immediately what that meant for a company whose factory sat in Alsace, right in the path of the advancing German army. He'd seen what the Nazis did to property, art, and industry they considered valuable. He wasn't going to let his life's work and his late son's masterpiece fall into their hands without a fight. So he made a plan. Move the most valuable cars out of Alsace by train toward Bordeaux, away from the invasion, somewhere they might stay hidden and safe until the war was over. La Voiture Noire was on that train. And this is where the story stops being a clean historical record and becomes a genuine unsolved mystery. Records show the car was meant to arrive at a specific address in Bordeaux. But historians who've dug through Bugatti's own archives have found something unsettling. There's no confirmation it ever got there. Not a delivery record, not a sighting, nothing. From that point, the trail simply goes cold. And in the decades since, that gap has been filled with theory after theory, none of them confirmed. Some believe Bugatti workers hid the car deliberately, tucking it away in a barn or a private property specifically to keep it from German hands, and that whoever hid it never got the chance or never survived to retrieve it. Others believe the Nazis found it during the occupation and either seized it for their own use or, more grimly, had it destroyed along with other confiscated property. And some simply believe it's still out there, sealed in a garage somewhere in rural France, or sold quietly decades ago to someone who has no idea what they actually own, sitting under a tarp in a shed, valuable beyond imagination and completely unrecognized. What we do know is this: 3 of the 4 Atlantics built survive today, and their ownership is well documented. One belongs to designer Ralph Lauren. Another sits in the Mullen Automotive Museum in California. Only La Voiture Noire, Jean Bugatti's own car, the one with the most personal story behind it, is missing. So let's talk about why this particular car, out of every lost vehicle in history, generates this much obsession. Part of it is scarcity. There are only 3 others in the entire world, and they almost never change hands. When a comparable Atlantic did sell privately, it reportedly went for somewhere between $30 and $40 million back in 2010. Values for cars like this have only climbed since. If La Voiture Noire turned up today, intact, verified, with a clean provenance trail, most experts believe it would immediately become the most valuable car ever sold, with estimates ranging from $80 million into the $100 million plus range. But part of the obsession isn't about the money at all. It's the story attached to the object. This wasn't just any Bugatti. It was the personal car of a young designer who died before he ever got to see what his creation would become. Hidden away by his grieving father to protect it from history's worst regime, and then lost to history itself. That combination, genius, tragedy, war, and an unsolved ending, is exactly the kind of story that keeps collectors, historians, and treasure hunters looking more than 80 years later. Remember that $18 million Bugatti from the very beginning of this video? Here's why it matters. In 2019, Bugatti built a brand new, one-off hypercar and gave it the exact same name as the missing car, La Voiture Noire. A tribute in modern carbon fiber and a twin-turbo quad engine, instead of riveted aluminum, to the original that vanished. That's the car that sold instantly for around $18 million. To a buyer who has never been officially confirmed, though plenty of speculation has surrounded who it might be. Think about what that means. Bugatti didn't just let this story fade into the footnotes of automotive history. 80 years after the original disappeared, the company built an entirely new flagship car just to keep its name and its memory still alive. Because somewhere this story still isn't finished. There's no confirmed ending, no wreck report, no auction record. Just a gap in history, waiting for someone to stumble onto a shape under a tarp in a barn that turns out to be worth more than almost anything else on 4 wheels. So, if you had to guess, what do you think actually happened to it? Hidden and forgotten? Destroyed by the Nazis, or still out there waiting? Let me know in the comments.